Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be introducing you to the final application that we'll be covering in this class. So we're going to start working in Revit now. Revit is the main tool that you are going to be using in practice, most likely. The other tool will be AutoCAD, but as I said previously in the class, everything is now moving a lot more toward Revit, and Revit has become the industry standard tool for architecture and interior design. So this is really the tool that is going to get the biggest emphasis as you are continuing your progress throughout this program as a student, and then also what you will be focusing most on as a working professional. All right. Revit is a very dense program. It has a lot of functionality built into it, and there are just so many topics associated with Revit that we can get into, and there's so much to know about Revit and so much to learn. So we're obviously not going to be able to get all the way through most of that content in this class. So my plan is basically for the next however many weeks we'll be working within Revit, to introduce you to some of the more beginner concepts. I want you to get comfortable in navigating around Revit and using the basic tools and understanding Revit's capabilities. Okay, and then after we complete this course and you move on to the second course in this series next semester, the 3D modeling and rendering course, we're going to pick back up with Revit and learn some of the more advanced concepts that are associated with it, okay? So in this video, I'm going to basically provide you just a general overview of Revit. We'll kind of compare and contrast it with AutoCAD and see what the differences are and see how this program benefits us compared to AutoCAD. And then in a separate video, we will begin working on just a very basic floor plan for your lab assignment for the week, all right? So when you go ahead and open Revit, this is the start screen that you're going to see. All right, so there's going to be a section here for your models. These are basically your project files. And then down here, you're going to see a section for what's known as families. You can think of the word families as blocks from AutoCAD, okay? In AutoCAD, blocks are basically collections of line work that were predefined that you can find online or pull from a library. Things like doors and furniture, and you can basically create these and then insert them into your projects and use them over and over and over again, okay? Families is the same thing, except this time instead of just simple line work, they're actually three-dimensional models that we'll be inserting into our projects, okay? So the thing about Revit is that's the biggest difference from AutoCAD. Revit is entirely a 3D program, whereas AutoCAD, everything that we were doing was in 2 dimensions, okay? So there's going to be a little bit of a transition there from taking things that are strictly just lines on a paper, and we're moving now into something that is completely 3-dimensional, and having 3-dimensional capabilities gives us a lot more power and ability as we are going through and actually putting together designs. And I think that you're going to be really happy with how the program works as you're using it. Now that you have that experience with AutoCAD and seeing just the differences between the two, okay? But like I said, there's these 2 categories here at the start when you open Revit. Now, before we go any further, I need to have you guys do a quick check for me, all right? And this is very, very important. So make sure you check this on your end, and if there's an issue, it's something that you have to fix before you proceed, or else it's just going to be a persistent issue that you're going to run into. If we go here to the models section, go ahead and click on new, and that'll bring up this new project window. Click the drop down here on the templates and see if you have these same templates that I do. Okay, so you should have 4: construction, architectural, structural, and mechanical. If you don't have these, there's a problem, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. Okay, so that's the check for this one. Do the same thing now for families. Okay, so go to new, and you want it to open this window. All right, you want it to say English_I here at the top, and you want to have this full list of these RFT files in here, okay? And also these 3 folders here at the top. So if when you click that button it doesn't take you to this folder, or it takes you to a folder that is empty, that is also an issue, okay? So I'm going to show you now how to fix this, because inevitably this happens every semester. There's always people who don't have these, and it's very important that you do, okay? So I'm sure there's a few of you out there who have had issues with installing Revit, and you probably don't have some of this stuff, okay? So I'm going to go now to the internet, and I will provide you the link to this page, all right, because you're going to need it. That will be attached to this video, so just look on Blackboard either above or below this video. There should be this link added in there. So on this Autodesk Revit 2021 content page, you want to scroll down here to where it says English, United States, and you want these 2 files right here. You want this Revit 2021 Imperial Family Templates file, okay? And then you want this one that says Revit 2021 Imperial Libraries, all right? These 2 files, you just want to click on these, and they are exe files, so whenever you download them and click on them to run, they should basically open up an installer, and then it will go ahead and it will install and add in the extra content that you need, all right? If it does that, or if it doesn't do that and you're running into problems and you go in and you try to check inside of Revit and see if these things are there after you go ahead and install them and they're still not there, let me know, because we will have to fix that, all right? It's, like I said, very important that you have these. For anybody running an older version of Revit, you don't have to use the newest version. If you have a slightly older version, it's fine. You will have to go back and download a different version of this, okay? So if you want to go ahead and download an older version of this content, there's a separate link that you have to go to. All right, so if you click on the downloads option here on that previous page, just click on downloads. Go here to where it says select a version. Choose the version of Revit that you have. So if you have like 2020, for example, go there, and then you want to go here to where it says Revit, Autodesk Revit content. And then based on what version of 2020 you have, just go in here and click on it. And it's the same page, but you just want to find within here in the English section the Imperial Family Templates, and then also the Imperial Libraries. All right, so once you've done that, let's go ahead back to Revit now. All right, and I am just going to open up this sample architecture project here, and you can do the same thing on your end as I'm going through this video if you want to just follow along and get an idea of how we navigate a Revit project. But I'm just going to click on this, and this is going to go ahead and load. Okay, so if we look here at the user interface, you'll be able to notice some things that are similar when compared to AutoCAD, and then some things that are different. The thing, what I think about Revit when I first look at it is, compared to AutoCAD, in my opinion, it has a lot more of a sort of welcoming user interface, as in it is simpler, okay? It's more easy to understand. With AutoCAD, in my opinion, there's a lot more buttons. If you've never used either program before, I feel like opening up AutoCAD and looking at it is a bit more intimidating than looking at, or opening up Revit and looking at it. Because instead of just lines and different line tools, you know, like arcs and polylines and ellipses, stuff like that, we're actually looking at real objects in this case. Okay, so if you were to look up here at the ribbon inside of Revit, for example, under the architecture tab, we have things like walls, doors, windows, columns, roofs, ceilings, floors, all that. That's all stuff that, in my opinion, is easier for somebody to understand just off the bat, okay? Because these are actual physical objects. It's not just lines that you are assembling to look like these objects, okay? All right, so another thing about Revit is it's a lot more button-based. All right, so back inside of AutoCAD, you'll remember along the bottom here, we had the command line, and you could go in and you could type in any command that you wanted if you knew what the name of it was, and you hit enter and the command executes. In Revit, we don't have that, okay? So in Revit, all of our commands and our command options exist as buttons that we press within the ribbon at the top of the user interface, okay? So, I mean, that also existed inside of AutoCAD, but here inside of Revit, that's kind of the default. Now, there are also shortcuts or hotkeys that you can use, similar to AutoCAD, like typing out the command. So for example, if you were to hover over these commands, like column here, you can see where it says structural column next to that title there is a parentheses CL, okay? So that is the hotkey to do that command, CL. If I were to go to my keyboard and type CL, that would begin the structural column command. Same thing for wall, WA. That's the hotkey for that. Door is DR, window is WN, and so on. You can go in and you can see what all the hotkeys to do those different commands are. All right, so like I said, in this case, it's more so shortcuts, but you're going to be using the physical buttons inside of Revit a lot more than you did inside of AutoCAD. All right, so here along the left side, this should look familiar to you. Coming over from AutoCAD, we have a properties palette here, which is very similar to what we had. So for example, if I were to click on something, you can see that my properties update once I select an element that's inside of my main viewport here. So now you can see what I am looking at. This is basically a layout inside of AutoCAD, okay? So you remember at the bottom where we had our layout tabs and we set up our sheets. This is what we're looking at right now. Essentially, you can think of this as the paper space. So this is the default screen that this project opened to, okay? And right here, we are seeing information about our particular title block that we have inside of this project, okay? So this is a metric title block, and there's all kinds of information here that is associated with that particular item. Now, if I were to switch and click on something else, like this text here, you can see now I'm getting information about that text. I'm able to see what the text height is, and then there's different options associated with that text, okay? So that is basically a one-to-one thing that is coming over from AutoCAD. You have your properties palette, and that is stationed here on the left-hand side. All right. Now, like I said, if we're thinking about this in AutoCAD terms, right now we would technically be in paper space, okay? So back in AutoCAD, we had those tabs, and we click on them to switch from the model space where we actually are doing our drawing. It's that vast infinite space where we're drawing our floor plans, and we're transitioning over to paper space when we want to add our drawings to an actual sheet of paper and set up a sheet of drawings, okay? This right here, the project browser, is what replaces that. All right, so inside of our project browser, you will see several of these sections by default. We have a floor plans section, we have a 3D views section, we have an elevations section, a sections section, renderings, all kinds of stuff. And then down here we have sheets. All right. So again, going back to AutoCAD terms, everything basically above where it says legends. Okay, so anything here up to the top where we're at floor plans. So floor plans down to like renderings, for example. You can think of all of this up here above that as our model space, okay? And then anything below that is things that have to do with our paper space. If you look here inside of my project browser, here where it says Sheet A001 title sheet, you can see that that's bold. That means this is the layout, okay, that I'm essentially currently looking at. All right, so if I look over here, Sheet A001, it's bold. I know that's the sheet that I'm on. Now, if I were to switch to a different sheet by double clicking on it, this would open up a new tab. All right, so here's my previous tab. This opens up a new tab, and this takes me to a new sheet in my layouts, okay? So again, I'm always going back to AutoCAD terminology because that's what we are familiar with. But essentially, these are our different layouts. If I were to recreate this in AutoCAD, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layout tabs here, and then 1 model space tab, right? And again, anything with model space is anything that is not associated with this sheet section. Legends and schedules, those are different things, but those are also not tied to our model space, okay? So here's another sheet in our project. This is the site plan, and you could go through and take a look at all the other sheets that they have set up here inside of the project. All right. And as we are doing this, you'll notice that I have different tabs that are loading as I go through, and I can toggle between these tabs, okay? And you can even open and close them as you wish. All right, so that is essentially our paper space here inside of Revit. Now, what about our model space? All right, let me scroll up here. I'm going to go here to floor plan 1 now. All right, so here I am, and this is essentially our model space inside of Revit. So Revit, if you're just looking at the user interface, it looks a little bit different in terms of color scheme. Okay, everything is on a white background now instead of a dark background. And things just look a little bit different. We don't have all the colors and layer information that we are used to from AutoCAD. So all of our walls now, these are black, and they're not the crazy color schemes that we had. So there, no more red walls, no more magenta, windows or cyan doors, things like that anymore. Everything now has just sort of a normal color scheme that is a little bit easier to look at, okay? Now, this, very similar to AutoCAD, is infinite space. So you can zoom in and out infinitely, and you can kind of draw anywhere inside of this vast space that is here, okay? If we are looking at the actual components inside of this viewport, for example, our walls, whenever you highlight over something, you can see that that entire element becomes lit up, and the cursor gives you information about whatever the element is that you're highlighting. So you can see here next to my cursor, I'm getting info that that is a wall, and I'm getting some information about the type of wall that it is, okay? Same thing for, if I zoom in closer, a piece of furniture, I'm hovering over that and that's telling me this is a dining room chair. Same thing for this. If I hover over this, this is a structural column, okay? All of this should look pretty familiar to you. A lot of the stuff that we covered in AutoCAD is transferring over here. So all of our blocks look very similar. For example, our doors. Our tags, okay, so here's a door tag. We should be used to that from Practical Assignment 1. You can see that we have some new tags, okay? So here, these are examples of window tags, if we're hovering over these. Here are our actual windows that these tags are referring to. Here we have room tags, okay? So similar to practical assignment 1 again, where we had our laundry and bathroom tag, now we have a room tag here that is denoting the living room space. We have one for the kitchen and dining room space, and we have one for the hall space, and then for these other rooms as well. Okay. Here, if you look at these, we have symbols for our different views. Okay, so here we have a symbol for our elevation views. Okay, so this one is for elevation 3, and that is pointing at this exterior wall here. This one here is for elevation 1, and that is pointing at this facade of the building here. All right, and if you zoom in, you can even see the sheet number that this is going to be located on. So again, if we're referring back to our first assignment, the number here at the top is going to tell us what view this view is on the sheet, and the number here within the marker is telling us what sheet that view can be found on. So we're going to find this on sheet A103, it appears. All right, same with this, A105. Now, something that is going to take a little bit of adjusting to is Revit is an intelligent program, okay? So what do I mean by intelligent? In AutoCAD, everything was basically just, dumb lines on a page that you were putting in manually, and if something changes or needs to be modified with the design, everything has to be done manually, okay? So, for example, if I had a kitchen space, well, let's just go here for example. Let's say I wanted to change something about the layout of my kitchen. So if I were to take this countertop, this is basically a countertop here. So this is like an island, and these are stools, okay? So we have 6 stools here, and here's my sink. Let's say I wanted to take this and I wanted to, alter the configuration of it. Maybe it's an L shape now. Maybe it's not just straight across anymore. Now, if I were to do that, and I already had a bunch of different drawings made where this is shown as just a straight countertop, I would have to go in and manually update every single one of those drawings where that where this element would be shown, or where that change would be reflected throughout the project, okay? In Revit's case, once I make a change in one spot, since it's intelligent, it's going to update anywhere else that change is happening, all right? Because everything here exists as a 3-dimensional object. It's no longer anymore us just putting lines on a piece of paper, these lines that mean nothing, okay? Basically, in AutoCAD, we are giving meaning to the lines because we're putting them in a certain way, but that also means that we have to go in and change anything about them anytime there's a revision that needs to be made. And that's what makes AutoCAD very tedious and time-consuming to work with, okay? It's difficult on projects because you have to always go back, and anything that needs to be modified, it's always just a hassle in terms of revising. In Revit, all of that stuff is intelligent, and it's going to be updated as you go through and just make the changes. That's actually why Revit has its name. So Revit, I believe, stands for, it's something about revisions, revise it, something like that. It basically got its name because it's very friendly when it comes to making modifications and revisions, okay? All right, so for example, since the objects inside of our viewport are now intelligent, so like our views, for example, so this marker is no longer just a symbol on the page. You can actually click on it and go to that view. All right, so if I were to double click on the head here, This is the head of the symbol, this arrow. You can actually double click on this and it will take you now to the east elevation. All right, so here I am in a new view of the project. All right, and I'm going to provide another illustration here. So let me just pull aside a separate window, and I want to show you what I mean when I say everything is sort of intelligent and linked together. All right, so I'm here on my floor plan, and let's say I select something in this view. All right, here I've selected a window. You can see here in my elevation view, that window is now highlighted. All right. If I were to go in and delete this window, you can see now that has disappeared from my elevation view. If I were to undo that and bring the window back, you can see that window comes back in my elevation view. All right, and the reason for this, again, is because everything inside of Revit is 3D. And you know, you've probably already been working in Rhino a little bit. It's sort of the same concept. We are basically looking at a 2D representation, an orthographic representation of something that exists as a 3D model. Okay? So any change, again, that I make in one area of the project is going to be reflected throughout the entire project where that is visible. All right, just one more example. Let's say I delete the entire wall here. Okay, I'll delete the wall, and that updates here inside of this view. That wall is now gone. Okay, so Revit is intelligent. Everything is linked together. And you're going to have to get used to these components being intelligent as we add them in. All right. Same for a section view. So sections, we didn't cover that in the first assignment, but a section view like this one here, if I double click on it, that is going to take me to that building section. Okay. So here we have a new view, and this is basically a cross section of the building that is running through where, let me pull this off to the side. All right. All right, so here's my section view. This section is basically running through where this line cuts through the building, okay? So anywhere this is cutting through the building, and this one jogs a little bit, so we can see the line goes all the way down here, and then it jogs, and it's now going through this portion of the building. That is all being cut away so that we can see a look inside of the actual building at that point, all right? So again, views are intelligent. This section view is going to appear on sheet A104, and it's going to be the first view on the sheet. So again, to just hammer this home a little bit, if I were to go to sheet A104, you can see that's my elevation, sections, and detail sheet. Double click on that, and I'm looking for view 1. That is right here. Okay, so let me fix my viewport here. There we go. So there is view 1, my building section, and that's the exact same thing that we were just looking at. All right. All right, so I'm going back to my floor plan now. Okay, so we're looking at everything in 2D right now, but to make things a little bit simpler, one of the ways that I like to work is in 3 dimensions, okay? So in Revit, we have the ability to switch between a 2D view like we're familiar with AutoCAD, and also a 3-dimensional view, because in reality, we are really working with 3D objects here, okay? We're just looking at them in 2D all the time. If you go up here to this house, this takes you to a default 3D view. So if I were to click on that, that is going to take me to now a 3-dimensional view of my project. And this should look a little bit familiar to you from AutoCAD as well. We have the view cube here. So if I were to click on my view cube and drag it, you can see I am now sort of orbiting around my three-dimensional object, okay, inside of the viewport. Now I can zoom in and out, and if I were to hold the Shift key and use my middle mouse button and drag, I can then orbit in 3D around here as well. All right. All right, so this is my default 3D view. But as we're creating things inside of Revit, and you'll see this as we go through and start working in the labs and stuff, how this is working, we're going to be basically drawing these elements, all these 3D things, as we would inside of AutoCAD, okay? We'll be working on a floor plan view, just a top-down 2D view, like we were here on level 1. This is going to be our normal, typical working view. And as we draw, very similar to AutoCAD, we'll just be drawing things. They will automatically be appearing in 3D in the background. And we can always toggle to a three-dimensional view to see how things are looking in 3 dimensions, okay? So I'm just going to run through here and illustrate just a few more things about the user interface. So in our different viewports, we have what's known as visibility settings. Okay, so our visibility settings are controlled here at the bottom of the screen. All right, so if I were to go down here, for example, this button right here is what's known as our visual style setting. So if I were to click on that, I get a little flyout menu of different visual styles. So right now I am in the shaded, well, actually maybe the consistent colors. If I were to switch this to something else, for example, like wireframe, you can see now it's just only the edges of the objects and I can see through everything. If I were to switch that to hidden line, now it's just a, again, line work, but there is no color information associated with it. Again, shaded. Okay, so this is basically what we had before, where we just have colors, but we also have the line work and we have some shading information on the faces. Okay, so we can see that this face, for example, is darker than this face. So there's some shading going on here. We have a realistic view. This is going to show us basically any texture information we have applied. Okay, so if I were to zoom in here, we have actual imagery for like our grass and stuff. And that's more important for next semester's class where we get into actual rendering and stuff. But we can actually apply textures like we did in Photoshop now to the actual 3D geometry inside of Revit. Okay, so that takes a lot of the photoshopping work, a lot of the manual photoshopping work out of the process, okay? But we have different view settings, all right? So that's how we control that. We also have what's known as a detail level, okay? So objects inside of Revit have different levels of detail built into them. This here, if I were to switch it right now, it's set to medium. If I were to set that to coarse, you should see some small changes happening. For example, okay, let's look right here. I can see when I switch that to coarse, some of that information tied to my window is disappearing because that's not as much detail. If we go to fine, then we'll get some of that detail back. This is more apparent in sort of a 2D view, like a floor plan. If I were to switch this to like fine, maybe, well, we're not seeing it here. You can see some changes happen, okay? So it basically allows you to get more detail out of your drawing. So for example, let's look at this wall right here. When I'm just at a coarse view, I'm just seeing a solid fill for all my walls right here. But if I were to go back to a fine view, I'm actually seeing all these little parallel lines. And what these lines running through the wall are individual layers that are making up the wall. Okay, so if you were thinking about an actual wall in real life, you'd have a layer of studs, whether it be wood studs, like a typical residential project, or if it's a commercial project, you'll probably have metal studs, okay, metal framing. And then on top of those studs, you're going to have different layers associated. So you might have an underlayment or a sheathing. Okay, so you're going to have like a sheathing layer if this is like an exterior of a house. And then you might have, your siding on top of that. If you're on the interior side of the wall, you're probably going to have, maybe an insulation layer, and then you'll have maybe drywall, okay, so like a gypsum wall board. So that's what all these little layers that you're seeing here throughout the wall mean. All right, and again, this is just a general overview. You're going to get much more in depth with this as we go on, okay? But within Revit, we have the ability to sort of build in that level of detail, okay? Whereas in AutoCAD, it was much harder to add those things in. For example, if I were to click on one of my walls here, you're going to see the properties of this wall. Here you can see that this wall right here is a timber-clad wall. If I were to click this drop down here, you're going to see a bunch of different walls that I have inside of my project. And these walls are all walls that you can sort of build out and customize on your own. But basically what we do is we create a bunch of different wall types, okay? And you don't have to get this detailed at all because this is a lot more architecture focused. Your architects are gonna know how to do all this, and they're gonna set up a lot of these walls for you. You need to be familiar mostly with different interior walls, so interior partitions and things like that. But as we go through and you're working on real projects, you're gonna have different wall types, okay? So different walls require different thicknesses. If you have a wall that requires plumbing, that's probably going to be thicker than just a normal wall. So just a typical wall, that's going to be around 4 7/8 inches in thickness, okay? So in the AutoCAD project, we represent that as just a 5-inch thick wall, but in reality, it's closer to 4 7/8 inch of a thickness. But you're going to have to set up different wall types and use them. And basically you go in and you have this menu over here where you add in these wall types, and you can click on them, and if you were to draw these in, it might not let me here. If I were to draw in a wall type, you can always go in after the fact and modify the type of wall that you're dealing with. So if I drew that as an interior partition, I could always click on this and switch that now to an exterior. And here you can see my wall is now thicker because it's made up of different components. It's got brick and CMU, for example, so concrete masonry is inside of this. Yeah, you just have different wall types, and that is something that you're going to have to deal with as you go through and you work on real projects. All right. Now, continuing on with the user interface, we have all of our tabs here along the top of the ribbon, similar to what we had in AutoCAD, except we have a few more that we're going to have to deal with. The main ones that you're going to have to worry about are architecture. This is what you'll be on the majority of the time. And then we have an insert tab, annotations, view, and manage. Modify as well, but some of these other ones you're not going to have because these are add-ins that I have in on mine. All right, but you're not really going to have to focus on like the structural ones, the system ones, analyze, massing insight, collaborate. Those, you don't really need to worry about those. So there's a lot more going on here at the top, but you don't have to worry about all of it. All right, so underneath of architecture, we have our build section, and these are just our basic tools, okay? So like walls and doors and ceilings and floors and all of that. And then we have few other sections, so like a room and area section, an opening section. This is how we create different openings inside of walls. And then work planes we will get into later on. Annotate, this is very similar to AutoCAD again. We have our different types of dimensions here, and we have a section here for detail components. That's something we will get into more in depth later. We have a section here for text, so we can just add in pieces of text like we did before. Tags. So tags are now a built-in thing. It's intelligent. So Revit is built specifically for architecture. So any tool that we need that is tied to the construction drawing process is going to be built into Revit in some way, so you're not manually bringing things in and making them from scratch, okay? View, okay, so views are something that we will get into in greater depth later on. You don't need to know too much about this, but again, we're creating different types of views. We have 3D views, we have section views, we have different types of plan views, RCPs, things like that. So reflected ceiling plans, regular floor plans, structural plans, all that. And then elevations. So elevations like our elevation markers here and here. We have framing elevations, regular elevations. We have interior elevations, exterior elevations. We will get into those later. Schedules. Okay, so we made a basic door schedule in our practical assignment 1 assignment. We have an actual tool for schedules here, and they work a lot more intelligently than us just typing in information. For example, when I say things are intelligent, I could create a schedule, and then I could basically tell the schedule, find any door that I have in my project and auto-populate my schedule based on those doors, okay? I can tell it, I want you to break down my schedule based on the door material and the door dimensions and the door type. So is it, is it a hollow core door? Is it, a steel exterior door? Whatever. But the thing about Revit is it's intelligent. I'm not manually typing in all that information. I'm building the 3D model and I'm telling the program, put together a document for me that is just based on my model. Okay, so search my whole model for all of the things that I am telling you to and put that information into a document that I am then going to print out or put onto one of my sheets of paper, okay, for my construction drawings. So everything inside of Revit is very integrated with one another. It's all intelligent, and there's not a lot of manual work going into this. There's manual work in terms of building the models out, okay, and drawing them, but there's not this tedious manual thing where you're building the intelligence into it like you would in AutoCAD. All the intelligence is already built in, and it sort of knows what everything means, okay, if that makes sense. Like I said, this is a very dense program. There's a lot going on, and even within all of these tools, there are multiple layers of sub-menus and things like that, and it takes a long time to really master it, but again, that is not our focus for the next few weeks. I want you to be familiar that all this kind of stuff is in here, and I want you to understand what this is capable of, but our main focus for these next few weeks that we'll be working in Revit together is just to get the basic concepts down and understand how we can start to work with it and reproduce the work that we did essentially in our first practical assignment, okay? So that was a very small project and we just did some basic things. That's all you really have to be worried about right now. I know you're looking at like a lot of information right here on the screen. You probably don't understand what it all means, and that's totally understandable. It can be very intimidating just looking at everything that's going on and thinking, man, I really have to know what all this means. No, you'll have to know what all this means maybe 10 years down the road whenever you're working on like real projects and you've really built up an understanding of how these tools work. But right now, you just need to worry about the basics, okay? And these skills and your understanding of it is going to develop over time as your projects get more and more advanced, and as you start to learn what some of these different building components are, okay? But a lot of this even is very architecturally related in this project, for example. So, certain components you'll never even have to worry about or touch. You really only have to worry about tools that are more specifically focused toward interior design. And as we go forward and we work on some of our lab assignments, you're going to start to recognize what tools you can kind of filter out and focus more heavily on, okay? So this is just a very general overview to get you familiar with the user interface, so navigating and what the user interface looks like compared to AutoCAD. So now In a following video, I'm going to jump into working on the actual practical assignment for this week, and we will start focusing on how we can start replicating some of our skills that we developed working in AutoCAD and how those transfer over from the 2D environment over here to Revit to the 3D environment.